Hello and welcome back to another new edition of Windows on Current Affairs. And as we continue to dive into the file of tourism and history in Egypt, of course, we are the leading, we are the #1 country when it comes to history, when it comes to museums, when it comes to sightseeing, when it comes to charming places and places to visit, wonders of the world, you name it. Today we continue to embark over the file of tourism. We take a comprehensive look this time over museums, the most popular museums and the modern museums in Egypt and the renovated museums. Museums are very important. You know, a lot of countries, worldwide countries that have no history at all, no monuments, no sightseeing, but they have good museums. But in Egypt, we have 1/3 of the world's history, 1/3 of the world's monuments, and we have also historic museums, and we are working hard also to establish new museums, new visions for types of museums. Today we're going to be talking about museums, and we're very delighted to be having with us a museum studies researcher. Her name is Manar Mazhar, and she's live here with us in the studio to talk to us about the idea of modern museums, not the historic ones, and how popular is it. Good evening, Manar. How are you doing?
Good evening, thank you.
My pleasure. First of all, let us talk about the idea of museums. The new generation of people who are tourist researchers and museum researchers are very much interested, to my knowledge, about the modern museums, not the type of the good old-fashioned museums that would display history, that would display the relics or display the monuments. No, you're working on modern museums. So yes. Tell me the story. What distinguishes the modern museums amongst other types of its counterparts?
Actually, in Egypt now we are living in a new era for a revolution in museums, and Egypt is demonstrating new museums and new types of museums. Actually, also we are opening new museums, and we are renovating the old ones. We have the new museums like the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, and we have the Sharm el-Sheikh, the Hurghada Museum. We have Kafr el-Sheikh, and we renovated the Royal Carriages Museum in Volak. So this revolution demands new concepts and like new perspectives of how we exhibit in our museums and what we have to exhibit in our museums. What the audiences want to see in our museums, because audiences, like, they are really bored from just antiquities. We want to see modern stuff in our museums, and that's the perspective and the approaches that our ministry and our country are demonstrating now.
Let me ask you, you raised a very important point, which is the audience. The audience is a very, very important element, because the type of audience, the background and cultural background of audience, it make a lot of difference, and it would direct you to how to establish a museum and what is the message that you want to deliver through that museum. There are two types of audience. There are the visitors who come for their vacation, and there are the tourists, and there is the Egyptians, of course. So what type of audience were you talking about when you come to establish modern museums?
Actually, museums are for everyone. So when we are talking about the audiences, we have to talk about the diversity, and we have to make our museums participatory museums, that they are open for everyone, the international visitors and the local ones also, because they are very important now. And after the Royal Mummies Parade, we could see the great interest for people who are really interested in museums and the civilization and what we want to see in the museums. For example, I went to the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, and it was very, very crowded with people, and I was really happy to see people like visiting the museums, and they are curious about our civilization. they just look at the artifacts and the objects like they are really important matters, and they want to feel like they belong to them. And I felt like people really belong to the place when they were at the museum, and that we want to do, like to make people engage in the museum experience. They have to go to the museum and take the experience, and after that they can tell us about this experience, and maybe they can come back to the museum and they tell their friends and families, we want you to come with us, and that's we want to make the repetition in the visits for the museum.
Right. Taking it from the types of museum to specific kind of museums, we have with us another a very important guest with us here over the phone, a popular one with us, Rana Ihab. She is a researcher of history and an Egyptologist, a young innovative character and young woman. Good evening, Ms. Rana.
Good evening.
How are you doing? How are you doing? We were talking.
Good evening, and I send my greetings for you, and I really appreciate all your talks about me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rana. And we were talking about the types of museum, the types of audience that would come and visit these new museums, and what type of messages and antiquities or culture we would present to them. Also, we need to talk also about the Suez Canal Museum. Of course, this particular one is one of the most important ones, and from a perspective of it's geographically speaking, historically speaking, culturally speaking, economically speaking. I mean, one of the very distinctive museums in Egypt is the Suez Canal Museum. Nowadays, it is being renovated according to the directives of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Talk to us about it. How far have we reached in that particular element?
Actually, as you just mentioned, the sites of the museums and the importance of these museums for the visitors, for the people in general, it's important to make a new museum only for Suez Canal. To make some openings here, actually, the Museum of Suez Canal located in Ismailia, Italy. So this is for the people and the audience who are hearing us now. It's an important thing. And actually, the building itself is a historical. So the building is historical. So think about something historical like Suez Canal, because if we dating back to this type of digging canal, it's dating to the 11th dynasty from the ancient Egyptian period. So the process itself, the museum itself, what inside the museum itself is talking about the history of those canals from the people who are working there. And also the objects inside the museum is related to the equipment that's using in digging the new Suez Canal. And also we have some objects that related to Ottoman Empress. One of the most important things as we're talking about the ladies and the fashion, the dress which the Ottoman attended the opening of the first Suez Canal part. So the design of the museum itself is mixed between European and Islamic architecture, which is amazing. The one who built this museum, this building would convert to be a museum. It's calling Dilisep, and he is an engineer. He's doing this to take his rest inside it. And now it's something talking about the history, the amazing mixed between old culture in Egypt and also in the European one.
We were talking about the types of audience who would visit those museums. What type of audience would visit museums like the Suez Canal Museum?
Actually, it's a new museum, and the idea, the way of making a new museum in Egypt here is amazing, because it's the targeting to this museum is all kinds of Egypt. The people who care about the history, the people or the children who want doing their school visits like the museum. So this is amazing. So it's open to all types of people. And also what is amazing about the Egyptian Museum now, they're caring about the disability. And that is one of the most important things.
Rana, I would like to thank you so much for your time and wish you all the best. And of course, you are an Egyptologist and a researcher of history. And going back to you, Manar, we were talking about the directives of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to brainstorm this particular phase of time in Egypt, establishing new museums. Of course, as we all know, like I earlier said, that there are some countries who do not possess any, that does not possess any type of history. New worlds, but they have very important museums. Let us take, for example, the United States, where you can see Guggenheim Museum, the Museum of Natural History, Museum of Ancient Civilization, and we have a City Museum, and we have other types of museums and particular places that would give you an authentic, mood. But still, it could not compare one of a fraction of our abilities and our history and our cultural background. Still, they are very popular. You came with an idea of establishing a city museum that is almost identical as one of the biggest museums in the United States, particularly in Manhattan, New York, that is very modern, does not talk at all about antiquities, but reflects the urban life and city life. How did the idea scratch to you, and how did you come up with it, especially that you are not an engineer? And number two, most importantly, you haven't been to Manhattan, New York, you haven't seen that particular modern museum.
Okay, I have been to Germany in 2020 because I had a scholarship to have a double master's degree there.
You established your master's?
Yes, I did my viva like 10 days ago.
And congratulations.
Thank you so much. And when I was in Germany, yes, we was in the pandemic time, but I had to visit museums there. And during my visits, I visited a museum. And this type of museum I haven't seen in Egypt. And I tried to contact my professors. I visited the Stuttgart Museum, City Museum, and they said that yes, we don't have a city museum in Egypt. I made a research, why don't we have a city museum in Egypt? And what is the city museum? City museum is a museum that is dedicated for people. It focuses just on people, their stories, ideas, memories, maybe victories and defeats, and what is happening in the city. All what is happening in the city, the urban development of the city. And then after a big research, yes, we don't have a city museum in Egypt. Like for example, Cairo, we don't have a city museum in Cairo. The very big capital, we don't have a city museum in it. So I decided, yes, let's make a project and an assumption for the proposal and the first city museum in Egypt. So Cairo is very, very big, yeah, and we are 20 million inhabitants. A city museum in Cairo would be very, very big. So we tried to narrow the borders, and we just focused on Khedive Cairo, which is downtown area, Al-Ataba.
So you're talking about old Cairo. I thought that you're going to talk about modern Cairo, and midtown Cairo, uptown Cairo, the most beautiful places where you go to, have dinner at night, or you go to dance and, change your mood, or probably places where you could find, those renovated places. So still we're going to talk about the downtown
because
Cairo.
If you mean the new capital, we have the Capitals Museum. It's not open yet, but we are going to open the new Capital Museum. and they have their the museum there. But in Egypt, in Cairo, sorry, we don't have really a city museum, and we just have in downtown area we have the museum of the Egyptian museum in Tahrir, and
The
that's
very
it.
popular ones,
Yes,
worldwide
it's a
popular.
very popular one, but it's just for antiquities and not focusing on people, their stories. It's another type of museums. But the project of the City Museum of Medieval Cairo or downtown Cairo, it's something else. It just focuses on streets, the memories of people, the cafes, the markets, the ancient types there, and we don't have antiquities in the City Museum. Maybe we have maps, we have archive papers, archive works, and also we have the properties of people. Like people can bring their properties that they have memories with, and they start talking about, like the things that they inherited from their ancestors and maybe parents. They still have it, and you still have.
It talks
something.
about contemporary life.
Yes, exactly.
Like the Pop Art Museum, you know, there was the Pop Art Museum is one of the also very distinguished museums that really reflected that particular 70s period of time where you could find the Beatles and John Lennon Imagine and the pop art and you know, Oscar Wilde before in the 60s and you know, Pink Floyd and Woodstock, you know, shows that used to be there in New York. I mean, even the drawings and the fashion of the 70s and 60s was very much requested, and the graffiti over, you know, the walls, and you know, that mood worldwide is reflected in the Pop Art Museum.
Yes. In our museum, we reflect the thoughts and the ideas of people there. Like, I made a survey, what do you want to exhibit in our museum? And then we had like 5 topics to exhibit in the museum. The first one is the urban development for the buildings, because every building has its story. It's like a tangible heritage, but inside it we have the intangible heritage, which is stories inside the buildings, and people can tell us about those stories. They are very welcome to tell them, to have the platform in our museum. And another topic is the cinema and theaters, because the downtown Cairo was very popular before the
Movie
60s
theaters,
of the
course.
last century for movies and theaters. They have like very places for theaters and cinemas, and they established the first ones in Egypt. They were there. Another topic is cafes and literature. We are talking in this topic about the role of cafes in the last century. They were like a literature hub for Naguib Mahfouz and others and authors and writers. They used to have like literature debates there. But let's talk about the cafes now. It's like the place where people share their stories. It's like a therapy place. We can come to the cafe and we
And
can
you can
talk.
find, you know, humor, that humor sense.
Yes.
But how do you, I need to ask you, here in Egypt, how is it going to work? The museum is a place where you display photos of those places, where you display documentaries, or it's a mobile museum that would take you to those places and people would relate, like a tour guide would relate stories.
Yes, actually, this could be the outreach programs and the workshops. We could make this also like events beside the exhibitions. Like people can visit the museum and have their experience. Maybe we can invite people of cafes and ask them, maybe we can cooperate and make an event with a cooperation with the museum and you, and we can invite people to talk about their stories here in the cafe. But actually it's an engaging experience because people came to the museum and they had the experience, and then we are inviting them to the place, to the context of their memories and stories. And maybe we just want to reinforce the feeling of belonging inside people.
It's very touching, but at the same time, the image is very important also, the presence of the image. Where do we see the image? I mean, is it going to be live? I mean, where you go to the places, or you have a documentary that could be played in the background, or just photos?
The archive pictures. No, we just have them in the exhibition. Like we have an exhibition, and we can exhibit them. You can touch them, but we can put them under glass and transparent glass. But you can't touch the archive papers. I mean,
don't you make a replica of? Can't you make a replica of those?
This could be
yeah,
a very good
miniature
idea.
cafe. You
Yes.
take that proposal
An idea. You mean a replica for the cafe itself?
for a cafe. I mean, inside,
maybe the stuff
like in
related.
Fishawi Cafe.
Yeah,
like,
and Rish
yeah.
Cafe and Droppy. We have a
Right.
lot of cafes there. Yes, but there's other stuff related to them, like the story.
And amateurs, people who are personifying Naguib Mahfouz sitting, and you know, like a small sketch where Naguib Mahfouz is sitting, and you know, there is a I mean, like a ceremony where they relate poetry, and then there are other you know, writers and authors, you know, debating with him.
This actually could be a good idea inside the gift shop of the museum, because the museum have a gift shop. We could make like replicas and other copies from the maps and the stuff that the audience were fascinated about, and we can just sell them in the gift shop that is related to the museum. And this is actually what could be a profitable thing for the museum to ensure its sustainability.
Right. So you presented this project
Actually, yes, in my master's, yes.
in your master's,
Yes.
and you took it over here to your home country, right? I want you to
did.
continue the story.
No, I was in Germany. I had like a 6 months internship, and after I finished it, I came back to Egypt, and then I wrote my master's thesis here in Cairo. Actually, I wanted to be inside the context of Cairo. I went there like for 1 month. I tried to look at the streets and witness everything in the streets. What can I exhibit in my museum? I just can't think of my own. I have to make people think with me. And I asked people, I made interviews with people, for example, who has ancient pharmacy, or maybe bookshop in Khedive Cairo or in downtown Cairo. And I asked them, what do you want to exhibit in the museum, and what are your memories here? They told me about their memories. For example, they told me about the memories in the cafes, that they first tasted the ice cream in our cafes in Khedive Cairo and in downtown. And also they told me about the tragedy memories they have when the Khedive Opera was burned in the 70s of the last century. So people have memories here, and they want to exhibit them to people. They want to tell them to people. And a city museum is a good platform for them to exhibit their stories and make it alive.
So is it only about the past? Nothing about the contemporary
No,
life?
actually, when we said Khedive Cairo is 200 years from until
That is one
now.
part, one section, one department.
No, it's
But
the whole museum.
The whole museum is about Khedive
Yeah,
Cairo.
yes, it's about Khedive Cairo. Actually, it could be a very big topic for the masters to make it like for Cairo. That's why we choose the downtown area.
I imagine that one day a museum would be made to relate this particular era that Egypt is taking, this booming era
Yes.
of revolutionary projects and the new republic in Egypt, and there is going to be a lot to be told by us.
Yes.
So you mainly are focusing over the contemporary, the city, museums, and you know, contemporary type of tourism. I mean, you're not focusing over antiquities or history.
No,
or
we don't have
prejudice.
antiquities in the city museum.
No, I mean, you are taking that lead in your study. You want to create a new image of tourism?
Because I came back from a background which is focusing on antiquities, and I felt like people were they really want new types of museums. They want you to introduce to them what they really, what makes them feel belongs to their country, more than antiquities, not just antiquities, because maybe the stuff that is very near to us, like the heritage, not the ancient stuff, is the stuff that is makes us feel belongs more than the ancient ones. They want new types of museums.
But you think that this era we're living in right now, it's there could be a lot to be taken out of it. I mean, it is an era that we should reflect. We should talk about too much. We should tell stories to other nations about it. I mean, this particular very glorious era that Egypt is living. I mean, this very, very modern era, it is one type of an touristic attraction in its own right. Right?
You ask anybody what is Egypt is famous for, they are going to tell you that it's antiquities and the ancient Egyptian civilization. But yes, in the new types of museums, we introduce stuff not related to antiquities.
But don't you think that Egypt now, in the new millennium, or in this particular era we're living, with all the rapid political changes, with the climate change, with the pandemics, and you know, the whole face of the earth is undergoing a massive makeover, even ideas and ideologies. Egypt could be very much popular by building in itself and going to a totally new level by kicking one of the most terrorist organizations gloriously and setting an example to the whole world by building a new republic which is equally glorious as the old one and could be equally historic as the old one, by building a new revolutionary mega project of infrastructural projects. This could be something to be talked about to people.
Egypt is marching to the new types of museums, yes, but also it's marching to renovating the other museums because we want Egypt to be modern and also its museums to be modern. That's why our new museums are really on the modern way. We could see the interactive stations and the multimedia inside our museums, not only stones and not only like showcases, but you can interact with the objects through multimedia and creating the experience that is really going to be the experience that lasts with the audience, with the visitor, even if he is Egyptian or the international ones. That's why I think Egypt is going towards modernity in museums, not only in the new types but also in the old ones. That's we have to do to renovate the old things, to renovate Cairo, not because we are going to have new capital. We are going also to renovate Cairo because we need it to be our glorious capital.
Right, but it's very nice and very smart, very selective from you to mention the interaction of our history with the modern one. Like, and let's take an example of the Golden Parade that was held earlier before, which became very, very popular. It was even hosted by almost all the world media outlets. It was taking a trend for a whole week because we interacted, like you said. We engaged the past with the present. We engaged the most glorious, the most popular, the most beautiful, the most magical queens and kings of the past with a beautiful modern Golden Parade. And we took them on a ride to a modern museum that is not talking about history, but talking about sustainable development and the a look over the vision over the future, which is the National Museum of Civilization, the Egyptian Museum of Civilization. How do you see that?
Well, I see that after the Royal Mummies Parade, Egyptians were really concerned about their civilization, and they started talking about museums and, wow, we want to visit museums. What can we see in the museum, and what are the mummies, and why you exhibit mummies? And they are curious about their civilization more, and that reinforces also the feeling of belonging to them. And the Royal Mummies Parade is a spectacular event that Egypt and then our president really prepared it on the right and the good way. No, it's on the excellent way. And yeah, we are very proud that after the Mummies Parade, we have a really good promotion for our museums, and Egyptians are really now careful about their heritage and civilization.
As someone in your profession and your own domain of interest, which is the modern history and the contemporary tourism and not the antiquities, what do you see in the contemporary life and modern life in Egypt that you think could be something to focus on in museums, or I mean something to attract tourism?
To attract tourism, I think we have to focus on the antiquities that they are really in our storages, because we have so much antiquities in our storages that we can tell stories about. For example, we have so much antiquities that we exhibited for the first time in the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, and it was really fascinating to see the oldest skeleton in Egypt discovered in Egypt. And also how you exhibit it is a very good something in the experience of people, because we had like the tools that people used to use in ancient times, in prehistoric times, and those tools were exhibited in a very good way to make the visitor see how it is like renovated, and how the ancient people in Egypt renovated it. And yes.
You have visited other places other than Germany?
No, outside Egypt, no, just Germany.
From your own point of view also, because you could have an eye, a very selective eye, that you could distinguish you amongst other normal people. Like, for example, if you see some places, normal places, contemporary places in Cairo, or in the other governorates, that you could come up with an idea for a touristic attraction. Like when you talked about the lives, contemporary lives of people, or like when you talked about buildings, when you talked about stories and memories and things like that.
Maybe contemporary life is a curious thing for people.
Nothing
like
about women to be displayed.
No,
I mean, the new women in Egypt, and I mean, because women have come a long way. When we talk about women, we could see the first judge, the first pilot, and we could see, some very successful women from low-income brackets who have struggled, who are strugglers and warriors, and they've achieved a lot. I mean, very nice and very respectable images and experiences for females here in Egypt. Don't you think it would encourage you to display something about
it?
And
actually, it could be a good also topic in the city museum. We could invite female staff too. Yes, you have to come to our museum, and you can tell us your stories. Maybe we can make an exhibition only for women in Cairo, and how they think, and what there are memories here, and what are their ideas, and yes, also the remarkable and the most famous ones in Cairo. It could be a great idea, yes.
Right. Because we all know that directives by President Abdel Fattah Sisi is to encourage and empower museums all over Egypt. And like you kindly mentioned, the old ones and the new ones, and also establish new types of museums. How do you see the effect of establishing those museums in airports, for example, like the one in Hurghada Airport? And other museums.
Yes, we have the airport museum. It's in Cairo, in Cairo International Airport. It's a good idea to have a museum inside the airport, because people are staying a lot of time there, and they have the transit time maybe. And if you make a museum for them inside this place to promote your tourism and talk about your civilization, it's a very good idea, because they can really decide to go to Egypt in another time. Yes, we can come. If we are in a transit, we can come to Egypt because you publicized your country in the airport, and we are curious to see more, maybe in museums, maybe in other destinations like Luxor and Aswan, and also the new destinations in deserts. So it's a great idea, because it's a promotion for our tourism.
Right, I guess it's a very, very wonderful idea. I'd like to thank you so much. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, but on a promise that you could come later on with a totally new idea and could have established City Museum in Cairo.
Hopefully.
Thank you so much, Manar Mazhar. You are a museum studies researcher, and you have been a dear guest to us for this week. Thank you so much. Best of luck. And I guess this brings us to the end of this edition of Windows on Current Affairs. Many thanks to all of you. Until we see you again next week, that's a goodbye.